Episode 4, Peace in the Middle East and on Your Street.
The world we live in is far from perfect. How can I effectively make a difference? This is Compassion Plans, a weekly interview to help you make the world a better place with your host, Bentley Davis.
You never know how it's going to go when you get up in front of 250 people who work for the United Nations and everybody that says, I figured out how to solve a problem that God and now John Kerry couldn't. Fortunately, people were amused by that statement, and they actually thought it was a great idea that we have.
That is Steven Rubenstein, and I'm Bentley Davis, and this is Compassion Plans. Today we're talking about peace in the Middle East and on your street through superior technology.
Try to tackle the crazy problem of actually trying to be a compromise solution that they can accept. So we're a little insane.
Steven and I met on the National Coalition of Dialogue and Deliberation email lists. It's on those email lists that we both noticed that we each entered our tools into the Night News Challenge.
We are trying to bring people together to actually compromise solutions to real-world problems.
My tool is less compromise and more debating the facts, but they both hope to bring people to agreement. The Knight Foundation put forth the Night News Challenge, which is designed to accelerate media innovation by funding breakthrough ideas in news and information. Winners receive a share of $5 million in funding and support from Knight's network of influential peers and advisors to help advance their ideas. Neither of us won.
Well, I've had some good feedback from people who work in municipalities and community engagement and people who worked in nonprofits, non-governmental organizations say, hey, this is an interesting idea. We haven't found success yet in the sense that we haven't solved the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But I did just present at the Build Peace Conference at MIT Media Lab in front of about 250 peace builders, people who work for the UN, people who work for various U.S. agencies, activists from around the world, including actually quite a few from Syria and all over Africa, Middle East and Europe, and a lot of other NGOs who are all there, all people who all work on this for a living, who really validated the concept, gave me a lot of good feedback and thought it was a really interesting idea. Love to see it work in many ways.
So, Steven, what inspired you to take on such a big problem, trying to get people to communicate over polarized issues all across the world?
I wanted to run for president, but my wife wouldn't let me. I decided, it's time to solve the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. We also got sort of tired of all the issues in the media where people say, oh, everybody's separated, people label themselves. My partner and I said, we need to create a way to bring people together so they can discuss and learn that people who might label themselves differently, I have a lot more in common with them than I ever expected. So we initially started out actually as a video debate site. The idea being if you could see people face to face and talk with them, not only would you be more civil, but you might even take the time to listen to them and learn that, hey, we have some common ground. But then we took a step back and said, video debate is nice, but it's expensive, and we couldn't figure out a good revenue model for it. But more importantly, we realized it adds more chatter to the world, and there's plenty of chatter and discussion. What we really wanted was to figure out how to solve the problem. So we regrouped and said, all right, how do we bring these people together with the aim of solving the problem, not just discussing the problem? The biggest challenge that we faced was starting out with the idea of, all right, if I'm going to get 10 million people or even 10,000 people to agree on something, how do you do that? Because there hasn't been a lot of history of success in that, let alone complex problems like Israeli-Palestinian peace or even, U.S. problems like immigration policy or abortion. So we spent a lot of time really starting from a blank page of what is the process that gets millions of people to agree? Why would they agree? And more importantly, how do you make it scale? Because at 50 people, you might be able to read all of their comments, have discussion, but you start getting, 500, 5,000, 5 million. You have to work on a process that scales, but that still gets people to feel engaged and actually, moves them towards a solution.
And how did you get it to scale? How did you get it to where you don't have to read everyone's comments to know what's going on?
Well, the process is we break down the problem into individual categories with action items. And the idea is that we ask you, sort of a survey type feature, which of these action items are you willing to accept, which will you never accept, and somewhere in between. And then you create solutions where a solution is a collection of those options. And then we have algorithms that try to identify at the individual level which solutions you might be willing to accept. And at the aggregate level, which solutions represent a good compromise that the system believes the majority will be willing to accept.
Wow. Can you give me an example?
So I'm just going to show you a sample problem for Israeli-Palestinian peace, which was actually not only the impetus for really starting this site, but also one of the core problems that we used to figure out how to solve this problem, how to design the site, what was the functionality, what was the process. So we broke down the Israeli-Palestinian problem into various categories, how to deal with the different issues in Jerusalem, including sovereignty over the various areas, East Jerusalem, the Temple Mount, which is where the Western Wall is, as well as Dome of the Rock, how to deal with the Palestinian prisoners, and we separated that into the ones who have already been tried and convicted by the Israelis, the ones who are just being held without trial, which is a lot of them, how to deal with right of return, which is a huge, huge issue for everybody involved, Gaza Strip and West Bank settlements. We actually various peace agreements going back over the past 100 years to try to figure out what are the various options and how to organize this problem as well as possible.
So you take the issue under debate and you break it down into the smallest problems you can, into little bite-sized issues.
Then within each problem, we have various action items for how to solve it. And for each of those action items, so for instance, with Jerusalem sovereignty, who gets sovereignty over the Muslim quarters of Jerusalem or the Christian quarters? And then for each one, we ask you, how do you feel about each of these? Is it absolutely required, meaning you won't accept any solution that does not have this? Is it a deal killer, meaning I will never accept a solution that has this action item as an option in there? Or are you somewhere in between? So you go down the list and you basically what we call scoring all of the action items to tell us how you feel. So this is basically where you say, here is what I like, here is what I prefer.
So for each bite-sized issue, you can propose action items to solve the issue, and everyone can vote on each action from a must-have to a will-not-accept and a range of interests in between.
And then we take that data and we try to determine which solutions would you be willing to accept. And when you propose a solution, you're basically saying, all right, let's just select the action items that we believe should be part of this solution. Now, for this one, for right of return,
which is the right of refugees from Israel to return.
We said you can only choose one option for this particular category because they're mutually exclusive. You can't literally do both or they would conflict with each other.
You can't have the refugees both return and not return.
Other ones you can say, all right, for Gaza Strip, you can choose a couple of them because that might make more sense.
So a solution is a collection of action items, and since people scored the action items, you can see how many people agree with each action, and you can see how acceptable the combined actions would be.
And you can vote on this, and you can say, yes, I support it. No, I'm opposed. You can say no opinion, or you can put down your vote as a compromise, meaning I don't love this solution, but I'm willing to accept it in the name of compromise. And that's really what we're shooting for. We only care whether you're willing to accept it.
That's very pragmatic.
Once you have scored the action items, we know a little bit about you, we will say, all right, here are the solutions that we suggest that we think you will like. Here are the ones we know you will like. Here are the ones we believe you will like, meaning you're probably willing to accept. Here are the likely to accept, or the ones that we don't think you'll accept at all.
And minimally acceptable?
Means it has every action item that you scored as absolutely required and none of the deal killers. So this is for you, for an individual, what our algorithms recommend. Suggested for all is the overall algorithm of saying, here are we think that are going to be the popular solutions that the vast majority will be willing to accept as a compromise. So the idea is the site is customized for you, but it also has in mind the bigger picture of how do we bring people together and get them to all support the same solution or as few solutions as possible.
So how do you bring everyone together to agree on something?
All of the interesting part of the system is the algorithms on the back end that sort of work to drive people together as part of the process. And it doesn't do it in one big step. For instance, if you're at A and I'm at Z, the compromise that we end up on might be G, it might be M, but neither of us are going to jump straight to there in one jump. You have to sort of work people a little bit at a time and drip on them and give them an incentive to go from A to B, from B to D, from D to E, and get them to accept G, but nobody's likely to accept G immediately without having some time to understand why they should accept G and sort of work them toward it.
You mentioned earlier how people with different labels, like, say, Republican and Democrat, might find out they have a lot in common. How does that work?
Well, when you register, one of the things that we really ask you for is to give us your profile. We want to know more about you and how you label yourself, and not because we want to use your information to sell you advertising. You are not our product. We're not Facebook. But it's about the more we know about you, the more we can show you how you compare to other people who label themselves the same or who label themselves completely differently. So you can find, hey, I said, all right, I'm a male, I'm a Democrat, I have a graduate degree. How do I compare against people who might consider themselves a Republican and who might have never even graduated high school? So we want people to see how you label yourself does not define you. You can say, all right, how do people vote by state? How do people vote by continent? You can drill down, how do people vote by income, by religion? Because religion separates a whole lot of people, and today so does income. How do people vote by political party and gender? So the idea is we're showing you how people voted on various solutions based on their labels. We think it will be very interesting to people to see how you compare to people who both label themselves the same and label themselves completely differently. Hey, if you're willing to give up a little bit, then I've got a lot more people that you're part of a larger group, and that you're willing to give up a little bit because instead of being part of the 1% accepting an extreme solution, you're part of 10% accepting a more moderate solution, and move people in that sort of sense of getting them into bigger and bigger groups so they say, all right, I'm willing to accept a compromise because we have a better chance of passing something with 35% of us supporting it than with 2% of us supporting it.
Are there any other important features you want to share with us?
One of the things that we've built in is the ability to do constraints. Israeli-Palestinian Peace is not a good example of this, but if you think about the idea of building a community park, you can tell us if you have an organization, so if you're a company posting it as opposed to, or even just a school posting the problem as opposed to just you yourself individually. You can tell us where in the world you are, because obviously it's a problem that just deals with Baltimore, Maryland. People who live near Baltimore will be interested to know that, but the rest of the world might not care. So that way we can localize the problem, say, hey, here are problems in Baltimore since you told us you're in Maryland. You can link to a video, and you can give us a description. The park has a certain number of square footage. It has a budget to build it. It has a time frame for building it. It has a time frame for, like when you want to open. And it also has a cost for ongoing maintenance. So we can build those constraints into the system.
It sounds like you've done a lot of work to create a useful and powerful website. Some of our listeners would like to do something similar, and I'm sure we'd all like to know how you found the time to get this all done.
Have a partner who makes money. It's expensive, when you stop making money and start spending it before you actually start generating revenue. You have two ways to survive in doing a compassionate or socially oriented company. One is to always be out there begging for money, whether it's from government or foundations or people, like philanthropists. The other way is to actually have a revenue model. If you can have a revenue model, that's a whole lot easier. It's a lot less, paperwork, and it's a lot less time that you spend raising money. Change.org supports over 300 employees with a fairly simple revenue model that works but scales really well. They don't spend time going after foundations and other people asking for money as like donations. The other thing is concentrate on generating users and revenue as quickly as you can. The sooner you can get the site out there, the sooner you can start building an audience and building a user base, the sooner you can start generating revenue, which allows you to keep working on it. Fortunately for me, I've been starting to work on the marketing thing because we spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to make it work, but I do have a wife who now makes money, so I'm allowed to spend a little bit of time pursuing what is my passion and my inspiration. So no matter what you do, make sure it inspires you, because if you're going to spend a whole lot of time on it, you better enjoy it.
And we appreciate you following your passion. We like to support the guests that are on the show. What can we do to help you out?
Well, the single biggest thing is use the site. Try it out, post a problem, get people engaged. The more users we have, obviously, the more successful the site can be. And the more real-world scenarios that are on there, the more we can use that to refine the algorithms. Not because the algorithms control the world, but because we're trying to make the system as efficient as possible to actually getting to the end result of solving a problem by finding a compromise that people can live with. And also feedback. Obviously, the more feedback, the better, because we're trying to make the system as easy to use as possible, and that's not going to happen unless people give us feedback. And you're not going to hurt my feelings by calling our baby ugly or telling us it sucks. So any feedback, as long as it's constructive and useful, we're definitely going to look at and take advantage of to see how we can improve the system, because we realize it's not perfect yet, and there's always room for improvement, and until we get feedback from people, we won't know what they like and don't like and how to make it even better.
And the website is agreedis.org?
Like agree to disagree. Agree, then dis.org.
And how can we get in touch with you?
Well, if you go to the site, there's a feedback link, which is fairly prominent, and that goes to me. There's a Twitter sign up on the site as well. So those are the two best ways. Obviously, they can email me directly or call me. I think my contact information is on the site. If not, the feedback link certainly gets it to me.
Well, Steven, thank you so much for showing us your amazing work and inspiring us to change the world in a big way.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And listeners, thanks for joining us. Get the links and notes for today's show at compassionplans.com/4. Never miss an episode by entering your email into our subscription list while you're there. If you appreciate what we're doing, go to compassionplans.com/appreciate to find out how you can spread compassion, like rating and reviewing this podcast on iTunes. Thank you so much for caring.
Okay, I just lost you. Are you there? Sorry, all of a sudden it went quiet.
Yeah, no, sorry. I had some background noise, so I muted myself. The washing machine.
We'll have to edit that out.
I thought I heard a washing machine. I'm like, no, mine's not on. I was a little confused because I'm on the other side from my laundry room, and I was like, does that sound like my washing machine? But mine's not on. But I'm not crazy. I appreciate that.